Hi, welcome to Arkintel. Imagine this, the United States, the largest oil producer in the world, breaking records with over 12 million barrels a day. A nation that no longer relies on foreign powers for its energy needs. It sounds like a success story, right? But what if this dominance isn't as secure as it seems? What if the clock is ticking on America's oil boom? Despite all the triumphs, the US remains one of the world's largest oil importers. Its reserves are depleting faster than expected, and the fracking miracle that fueled this revolution faces mounting backlash from environmental disasters to economic uncertainty. The question isn't whether this oil empire will crack, it's when. And when it does, the consequences could ripple through the entire global economy. Stick with us as we uncover the uncomfortable truths behind America's energy dominance, truths that might just redefine the future of global power. For decades, the United States was deeply dependent on foreign oil. From the 1973 Arab oil embargo during the Yom Kippur War to the 1979 Iranian Revolution, crisis exposed how vulnerable the nation was. Prices soared, fuel shortages brought gas stations to a halt, and the government imposed drastic measures like speed limits to conserve energy. But in 2018, everything changed. The US surpassed Saudi Arabia and Russia to become the largest oil producer in the world. By 2019, production hit an unprecedented 12.3 million barrels a day, a level previously deemed impossible. This was the start of what many call the shale revolution. Fracking and horizontal drilling transformed regions like the Permian Basin in Texas and the Bakken Formation in North Dakota. These areas became economic powerhouses. Texas produces over 40% of all US crude oil, with output increasing five-fold since 2010. North Dakota, the Bakken Formation drove massive growth, turning towns like Williston into booming hubs. Between 2008 and 2014, North Dakota had the nation's lowest unemployment rate and became the only state where the population grew younger between 2010 and 2021. The success of fracking led to the US becoming a net oil exporter for the first time since the 1940s. But this transformation came with its own contradictions. Despite its dominance, the US remains one of the world's largest oil importers, with 41% of its consumption still relying on foreign crude. How is this possible? The key lies in the type of oil being produced. Fracking extracts light, sweet crude, oil that's low in sulfur and less dense. However, most US refineries, particularly along the Gulf Coast, were built decades ago to process heavy sour crude imported from nations like Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Canada. Upgrading these refineries to handle light crude would require billions of dollars and years to compete. Instead, the industry found a workaround, exporting the light oil to countries that can refine it and continuing to import the heavy crude for domestic refineries. This strategy is profitable, but short-sighted. By exporting its most accessible reserves, the US accelerates the depletion of its own resources, a problem that's becoming harder to ignore. Fracking's rapid rise came with significant environmental consequences. First, methane emissions. Fracking sites leak large amounts of methane, which has a warming effect 30 times greater than carbon dioxide. Second, freshwater usage. Each fracking well requires up to 60 million gallons of water, often depleting local supplies in drought-prone areas. Third, wastewater contamination. Fracking produces toxic wastewater that's pumped underground, risking contamination of groundwater supplies. Fourth, flaring. Excess natural gas is burned off at fracking sites, wasting valuable resources and contributing to air pollution. These issues have sparked fierce opposition, with some states like New York banning fracking altogether. Internationally, advanced economies and global agreements like the Paris Accord are pressuring the US to phase out fossil fuels entirely. Yet, fracking has also given the US geopolitical leverage. After sanctions on Russian oil in 2022, American light crude became a lifeline for European nations seeking alternatives. This dual role, as both an environmental risk and strategic asset, makes the future of fracking highly uncertain. The US Energy Information Administration estimates that current oil reserves will last only 11 years at the current production rate. While fracking can potentially extend this timeline, its rapid extraction rates mean wells deplete significantly faster than traditional methods, often reaching peak production in just months. This forces companies into a continuous cycle of drilling new wells to sustain output, driving up costs and raising questions about long-term viability. Meanwhile, renewable energy is gaining unprecedented momentum. Wind and solar capacity are expanding rapidly, and the US has pledged to triple its nuclear energy production by 2050 as part of its broader push for net zero carbon emissions. As the energy transition accelerates, oil producers find themselves in a race to adapt before their relevance fades in a world increasingly dominated by cleaner, more sustainable alternatives. As the boom years fade, the US oil industry is consolidating, with the number of publicly traded oil companies dropping from 65 to 41 in just 5 years. Major players like ExxonMobil and Chevron are leading this change. ExxonMobil's $60 billion acquisition of Pioneer Natural Resources solidified its dominance in the Permian Basin, while Chevron's $53 billion purchase of Hess added valuable assets, including Hess's operations in Guyana. These mergers allows companies to streamline operations, such as extending horizontal drilling to maximize output per rig, reducing costs and optimizing infrastructure. However, this consolidation marks a shift from rapid expansion during the fracking boom to a focus on efficiency and survival in a changing energy landscape. As global markets move forward, renewable energy and climate policies tighten, the super majors are positioning themselves to navigate an uncertain future. America's oil boom has been a story of innovation, dominance, and transformation. But it's also a story of contradictions. Reserves are depleting, environmental costs are mounting, and the world is shifting towards cleaner energy faster than anyone anticipated. The cracks in this empire are growing wider. The question isn't if the US oil boom will end, it's how soon. And when it does, the ripple effects will reshape economies, industries, and global power itself. This countdown has already begun.